Сайн байцгаана уу хүн үзэгчдээ. Өнөөдөр манай Defacto нэвтрүүлгийн зочноор Америкийн нэгдсэн улсын ПАТЕРСОн компани дэд ерөнхийлөгч хадагтай СЮЗАН Grelling оролцож байна.
СЮЗАН Grelling, ПАТЕРСОн компани дэд ерөнхийлөгч. СЮЗАН Grelling Америкийн нэгдсэн улсын Миннесотагийн их сургуулийг эдийн засагч мэргэжлэр төгссөн. Тэрээр Land O'Lakes, Hanson, Niche Markets International зэрэг компаниудад эрсдлийн удирдлага, ханган нийлүүлэлт хариуцсан захирал зэрэг албан тушаалыг хашиж байсан. СЮЗАН Grelling 1998-аас 2000 онд Монгол улсад Mercy Corps олон улсын байгууллагын бизнес үдэ аж ахуйн хөгжил хариуцсан захирлаар ажиллаж байжээ.
Good evening.
Good evening.
What brought you this time to Mongolia?
Oh, I'm so excited. It is a 20-year reunion of the Mercy Corps Govin Eflel project. So back in 1999, I was asked to come to Mongolia and participate in the transition to a market economy. So we came to Mongolia, we started a business program, breeding program, animal husbandry, and tourist program. I had a very special team of high performers with people that are very passionate, total Mongolian staff. We not only made great progress on those projects, but more importantly, we had a very good time working together. So much so that 20 years later, we decided all to get together, and we just spent a few days down in Dalin Zadgad at the local Nadam, having a good time reunion.
Very interesting. You came to this country 20 years ago first, right? And you spent 3-4 years with Mercy Corps?
Correct.
And Mercy Corps is doing some number of interesting projects, including continuing probably this breeding, tourism. And so you were absent, say, 20 years.
Correct.
What kind of particular changes is striking for you?
Well, some of the particular changes that are striking is, first, when you land in Ulaanbaatar, is the amount of growth in Ulaanbaatar, the spread of the city itself, and then also the size and scope of the construction that is going on. In addition, the Ger village also seems to be growing. And from conversations with friends, also the infrastructure in the Ger village seems to be a continuing concern. In Dalin Zadgad, I had spent a lot of time in Dalin Zadgad when I was first here. It is really growing as well. So the amount of apparent wealth that's been created, either with the mining or in Kashmir, really has enabled Dalin Zadgad to reinvest in its own town. We saw where they have construction of a movie theater, a performance theater. They have new housing districts and museums. So the quality of life, I believe, in Dalin Zadgad is also participating in the increase of wealth that we see in Mongolia, in Ulaanbaatar. So those would be some of my initial observations.
Yeah, that these 20 years very much were defined by a very extension of mining industry. And not surprising that Dalin Zadgad namely is getting more developed. And other IMACs also, but however, the growth rate in Dalin Zadgad is higher. With all these changes you have observed, you said about the extension of Ger village, more people are coming to Ulaanbaatar city, and it's more crowded. Nothing to say about the traffic jam. I mean, how you would think would be interesting the better way to solve this kind of congestion problem?
Oh, that's an excellent question. You know, I'm sure there's many people working on that. You know, if I were to look at it just simply as an outsider, with continuing people and herders moving to town, it seems like there's a dual path. One is, what's the infrastructure take care of the new people coming in so that they don't, add to the problem? And then once we have control of that, then you can go, now how do we solve the middle part that expanded without that infrastructure. That's putting pressure on either the environment or on congestion, etc. But if it's taking a long time to get the infrastructure in the initial area, and there's nothing being done with the influx, it's just going to exponentially expand that problem. So just I would say the timing of how do you look at what aspect of the infrastructure to look at first. Because the gear camps have been around since even I was here, there's been a lot of time for that gear camp to grow in scope and scale, which will make it even more difficult. And as I understand, the herders that are moving in, where their gear is located, they own that land. So then to ask them to move for a road or a public service is going to be very difficult.
Do you recall any other country in that similar situation, not necessarily with gears, but other kind of lodges? What is the best way? Because on one side, either you need to create this infrastructure they want to have in countryside, in Amax, where they are living. But because Mongolia's peculiarity, few population, large country, and it's very expensive to make such an infrastructure where there's no vibrant economy. What is the best way to have less centers, regional centers, or how do you see that? I'm asking you because you have been working with the supply chain, solving problems in a very complex way. So that's why it's very interesting to know your points.
Right. If to consolidate the centers would mean that there'd have to be a vibrant enough economy at a central location that would attract talent. Okay, so let's look at Dalanzagat. A, it has mining. B, it has cashmere. It already is growing. Can that be a center to grow with? So if you look at cashmere, for example, you know, I've watched some of your previous shows, and I've heard the argument of cashmere, is it quality or is it quantity? Well, it is demand driven. It is if the customer is looking for fine quality, and you take that supply chain backwards. So you go to the region, Dalanzagat, for example, and you say, we are going to work with that whole supply chain, and how much of that value can be pushed to the IMAG. So on the previous show, there had been the conversation of, well, if herders were to sort their own cashmere, they could earn more, but they don't. Why not? I would guess the financial spread between fiber that was sorted and fiber that was not sorted was not big enough to encourage the herder to do that.
Yes.
So the thing when you look at the supply chain, everybody has to participate.
How to trigger that?
Yes. And
that moment.
Yeah, and you trigger it, demand back.
Demand back.
Yeah.
How can I do that? How can we do that?
So where the profit is most is
with the final products, of course.
With the final products, of course. And so in today's environment, where supply chains are now a competitive advantage, to say that we would work with a Burberry or a Johnson's of Elgin and go, let's secure your supply chain. Let's look at, in order for you to have the herders sort their cashmere, you need to reduce your costs, which means the sorters would need to come out of your operations in order for you to fund the herders making more money sorting themselves. But if we don't connect those people, then they don't understand the decisions that they're making.
Understand, it's logical, but however, on the site, say Burberry agree, say, okay, I like your idea, let's go back. How technically and in which way they can increase that sorting out value, part of the value chain, staying with the herdsman?
When you look at improving the supply chain, you look at where you can take out redundant costs today. So there is cost built into the system for sorting. It is not spent with the herders in the rural IMAG. So if the goal is to get more money in the rural IMAG, you take out the expenses that deal with sorting and you move it upside into that supply chain at origin. It's when the supply chain can take out the other costs, that extra cost. Let's say it's a value of 100, whatever 100 is. If 80 goes back to the herder, the whole supply chain has more
technically
value.
sounds great. I understand logically very well. But what is happening is those people who are buying from them on the way they kind of sorting out. And why they are doing that? Because it's logistically very hard for all herdsmen to get together and sort out their own cashmere. Instead, one guy is picking it up, bringing to Ulaanbaatar from many areas, this kind of cooperatives here. And then before they sell to the washing machine, the washing company, they sort it out. And here is the price of logistics, transportation, going in between each gear, etc. How you would do that? How, I mean, should these herdsmen have own cooperatives or?
I would say there's great benefit to that. So it's called a hub and spoke. So if you would have a hub and spoke where the herders were to bring it into an IMEG center, there is the ability for the sorting to be at the IMEG center, and then the bulk transportation from the IMEG center to the washing facility, which is probably more centrally located in the city area. Correct.
So the herdsmen will pick up the cashmere, everybody bringing to IMAC altogether. They have a bigger pool, and there they are sort out. Then divide their work, divide their value.
Well, and it would be by the quality, by the color. There would have to be, the herders would still be paid for the quality of cashmere. Then the co-op would add the extra value of the sorting. And that way it would be an objective sorting. Because what the manufacturer or the washer is looking for is not necessarily going to trust a herder to sort their own, because they may sort it at a higher grade. They may actually leave debris in it, so it increases the weight. If all those herders come in and they had a qualified person in the middle that did the sorting, and there were the standards, and there was quality inspection of that, then the washer would have more assuredness that what they got, the incoming cashmere, actually was what they thought they bought.
And then it is to be that center. You said hub and spoke.
Hub and spoke.
Hub and spoke, right?
Yes.
Hub and spoke.
Like a wheel, a hub and the spoke.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, wheel and the spoke. Okay. But this one, this center is to be kind of structure in which each herdsman is in.
Yes. And then when that structure makes its own money, it gets distributed to the herders.
Okay.
That's where the cooperative structure of repaying the profit in form of a dividend to the participating herders.
Good point. Very good point. Well, I'm just IMAC and the SOM centers, many SOMs, about 30 SOMs in each IMAC has. Probably initially they come together to SOM, because for some SOM herdsmen, the IMAC center is closer than the SOM center. So depending on where they are close within the IMAC,
they would go to the closest.
Then 15 then get together. Yet, well, it is to be organized. Otherwise, the guys, we call it change.
Yeah, the changers.
The guy come and they pay more money than they would think. Well, we should trigger that process anyway. Okay, let's go to the second questions. I have a couple of which, because you have been working with the global supply chain. Your company is also a supply chain. Let's talk about supply chain. What do you do exactly?
Sure. So supply chain is known for delivering a company's promise. So a company may promise to make food, they may promise to make carpets, they promise to make something and deliver a value. Once
and very interesting. Instead of product, you said promise. It's very interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because it can also be a service.
Yes.
Right?
Okay. Okay.
As soon as that promise is made, then operations and supply chain kicks into gear.
Yes.
We say, to deliver that service, what does it take? Often we work with suppliers and we negotiate either raw materials or finished products. We transport them into a warehouse. We manage that inventory. And then when the order comes through, we ship it to the consumer. Consumer can be an intermediary or the final consumer. The supply chain also then has to take care of if there's a return. If the customer is not satisfied and they return it, you have to go back through that supply chain.
Supply, okay.
Yes.
And inventory. In that sense, every promise that you said is consisting of supply chain, because you cannot do everything yourself.
Correct.
It's impossible too. And nowadays, when electronics, computers can faster and more effective, can manage zillions of inventories, items, what are kind of things principally changing now in this?
Yeah, there's some very big changes in supply chain. So blockchain is very big now in leading supply chains. So blockchain, simply put, is when computers are connected and they share the same data. And by doing that, everybody is on the same page. So everybody can see inventory simultaneously. Everybody can see billing and pricing simultaneously, so that the supply chain can reduce its overall time.
You know, before, somehow, not all of them, but all related computers were somehow tried connected.
Correct.
But what makes the blockchain more efficient, those computers connected better? Why?
So I'm right in the middle of this now with Patterson.
Okay.
So Patterson implemented something called SAP, and that is one of the global supply chain softwares.
Okay, yes.
Yeah. And what it does is you have to ask to connect to each customer or each supplier's computer. And it's a one-on-one conversation. And there's human error. You get the wrong digit in the wrong order. You have inventory being called different things. I will call it widget A. You might call it a widget. And it doesn't match. So in today's environment, in supply chain, one of the biggest inefficiencies is the data doesn't match.
Yes.
In blockchain, the computers agree to the same, let's say, password. And as soon as one computer updates, they all update. And so it takes out the error, it takes out the time of transmission, and it increases the ability for companies to communicate electronically. So it even propels...
It's so-called this, not Internet of Things?
No, Internet of Things, that's a really good question. Internet of Things is a broader term, and blockchain is within it.
And I also understand blockchain is, unlike if computer, any symbol is consisting of 2 bytes, right? Yes, no, right?
Yeah.
Then blockchain, I understand that yes is consisting of many, more than 250 or so symbols, code, right?
Right.
That can be done only with very high-speed internet.
Correct.
And which also makes impossible to edit back what I've done into the blockchain.
Correct.
So ledger is not changed.
Correct. You can't edit back. You can adjust forward. Right. So you would make an error.
Yes.
You'd recognize an error, and then you'd put in a new action to correct the error.
Yes.
Yeah, but you can't. You're right. You can't go back and change it.
What makes impossible to go back?
Oh, that would be an IT question.
I
know how to use it. I don't know though why technology doesn't let you go back and do it.
Because as I understand, you need those so many passwords or so many exact. For example, if I typed ABC, it's clear. I will ask you an ABC type. But now this A, what kind of symbols is consisting, nobody knows. It's impossible to know. So that blockchain is kind of new internet revolution, how that's we understand here. And that can be also more good chance for a small country, developing countries like Mongolia, if we understand it faster and use it faster. That's my take.
It could be that you could actually leapfrog.
Leapfrog.
Right. as technology is moving fast, so for example, the supply chain software that was available 20 years, if you had invested in it, it's in your company, it's almost outdated now. It might not even be supported. So now you have to put in a new technology. And then if you go, for example, for SAP, they're going to have a new platform in about a year. So now you have to adjust that platform. But there's becoming, especially for emerging countries, there's very nimble software that is smaller, that I believe that you could probably evaluate, see if it work, and then access that blockchain faster. I mean, that's the exciting thing. For example, when I was here back in 1999, going cellular, the adoption of the cell phone, you didn't have to run all the lines throughout the whole country, right? You just went straight to the cell phone. So that same leapfrogging might be available with the blockchain technology.
Internet of Things is bigger, blockchain is smaller inside of these things. And just was wondering, SAP, you said, it is one version. The other version is Microsoft has all Navi or navigation, etc. The other version. Which one is, for middle company, is preferable?
You know, that's a good question. I've worked primarily with Fortune 500. So the smallest company I've worked with, that was profit motive, has been $6 billion. So I would say there is quite a bit of documentation on, if you look at size and scale of the technology, and then cost, that has been, there's quite a few resources online that actually grid that out. And they'll put the 5 or 6 companies in the right blocks, and then it would be up to the smaller company to look at those and understand. Because, for example, if you are working with an agricultural commodity, there are future contracts, etc., and a certain software will be better for that. If you're a manufacturer, there'll be software that are better with manufacturers. And likewise, if you're a distributor, different softwares are better for that. So I'd say there's comparisons available, but each company should really look at what is best for them, and maybe look up and downstream and ask what are their suppliers using and or some of their key customers, and see if linking some of those technologies wouldn't even be beneficial.
I'm just trying to figure out, back to our conversation about hub and spoke about Kashmir. Maybe there is a certain way to create this data for herdsmen. For a particular herdsman X brings this year this and that amount, next year this and that amount, so that eventually we make shift towards quality rather than quantity. If there is any similar scheme works somewhere else in the world,
for doing that,
not necessarily Kashmir,
fiber?
but in general in the supply chain of that matter.
There's quite a few large global supply chains that are doing blockchain, and the way they're similar is the blockchain only acknowledges data. So as long as it is a herder name, the volume, the quality, the color, the microns, etc., that's no different than a Wall Street bank with a ledger on who has what account, trading what product, right? So I don't see why it wouldn't work, and that the comparative, there'd be numerous comparatives.
So when you work with the blockchain technology, do you work with the same computer? Or it's different matter?
You can work with the same computer.
Same computer?
Yeah. It's the acknowledgement between the computers with that large code that you're talking with.
So blockchain necessarily means network of computers. With that same token, how do you think about the Bitcoin?
Ooh, yeah. That's interesting. So having been a commodity risk officer before for a very large portfolio, it was for a $6 billion portfolio, I look at risk and reward. The reward is quite high for Bitcoin. If you're able to generate the code and earn your Bitcoin, there's many vendors that will take Bitcoin. The downside is the risk. If you have a computer failure, if you have a non-acknowledgement, if you have your market volatility, which is extremely high and not regulated, the downside risk is almost unlimited. So I stay out of Bitcoin.
Okay. And when do you expect that is coming back?
You mean when will it be more widely
used? Yes.
What people like about Bitcoin is that it's unregulated. What I don't like as a risk officer is that it's not regulated. So if I were to take Bitcoin, I'd actually ask for a premium. Because by the time I took the Bitcoins and tried to convert them, if the market fluctuated wildly, I would lose quite a bit of money. So I think for the larger companies that I'm in, I would be very hesitant to get in until there is more regulation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, since you have been working with risk management of many companies for the last 20 years or so, and also you always were dealing with, of course, certain people were making decisions, leadership issue, right? And it is a matter where in a hard situation, the leaders show with his or her example how to overcome these situations in the company, etc. What was the best character of leaders you have seen that impressed you and stays with you?
Oh, that's an excellent question. I have 2 bosses that I think about when I have a hard decision. I think, what would they do? Because when I was working for them, they were the best of the best. One of the characteristics was that they did not do my job for me. They clearly defined the outcome that they wanted me to achieve. They clearly gave a timeline and then told me to go figure it out. My role then was to figure it out and keep them and communicate with them and keep them abreast of my progress. One example that I used recently is I had a boss that had that style, and there was a weak part of my skill set. Okay? And it was, I was in a position where I had to do a lot of writing, and I'm an economist, I like my math, I like my graphs. I don't usually write tomes of documents. But he said, you have to write this document. And the first time I turned it in, he circled all red. He didn't rewrite it. He didn't redo it. It was go do it again. Took me 3 times. And the very last time it was 1 circle and a congratulations. But what he did is go, he knew how to do it. But the goal wasn't that he knew how to do it. The goal was that I learned how to do it. And from that, I was able to really develop very strong skills. And so I try to do that with my employees as well. The other strong director I had was one that was very transparent. He would share as much information as he knew so that when independently we were making decisions, there was a very good possibility that we would make the same decision given the same circumstances. And because of that, I also could be very autonomous. He had given the example of if you were, for example, a policeman, and you and your colleagues were going to go into a very dangerous situation. You'd all want to know the same information going into that. So at work, he'd say, "We're all going to have the same information." You know, as a boss, I'm not gonna hide any, and that really raised our decision-making capability.
What a wonderful 2 characters you have just described.
Very much.
You get the person learning.
Yes.
I mean, with the best efficient way. That means you don't do it instead of that person, teach them. And second is actually transparency. Yeah, it is good for any kind of management, governance, because if some of your teams have half information, it cannot work.
Right.
Susan, that was a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. За, хүндэтгэгчтэй өнөөдөр манай Defacto нэвтрүүлгийн зочноор Америкийн ПАТЕРСОN гэж компани дэд захирал СЮЗАН Grelling оролцлоо. Баярлалаа.